Hello, everybody.
Hey, happy Friday, everybody.
Welcome back to our daily Bible study. Hope everybody's doing okay. It's a little quiet today.
Yeah, maybe still catching up with us.
Makes me wonder if I should check and make sure we're going out.
I think people maybe they have big weekend plans.
Well, it's a nice day.
It does seem a little odd that we haven't.
Hey, there we are. Hi, guys. Deanna, Karen, glad you were able to make it today. Hope everybody's weekend is going to be good. This last week of football camp, right? Or not last week, first week, end of the first week.
Well, first week of practice was this week.
Okay.
Yep. Next week we go to practice at normal after school-ish time, and then they're in it.
That's good.
Week after that's game week.
All right.
Trying to figure out what to do with breakfast. We won't really be having football breakfast.
That's a good point. Hi there, Amy. Good to see you. Happy Friday. Yeah, that's a strong point.
Yeah, I don't know if that looks like handing out donuts or letting everybody do it on their own. Yeah, kind of
Is
miss
there
that.
any thought given to the type of food served at breakfast?
I
Like
think some
athletically?
some people, no, not a whole lot. I mean, some people are conscious of it, but I think most people assume that the kids are eating whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But if one was going to, I don't know, if you're playing at an elite level, is there a certain type of food?
At that point, you would. You'd have trainers involved. You'd have probably some natural carbs. You'd have a lot of protein. If it was game day, you'd probably go easy on the heavy carbs, probably a little bit easy on the fat. It'd be a lot of lean stuff, protein, fruit, maybe some oatmeal, something.
So what's this talk about carbo-loading? That not a football thing, it's just another thing?
That's more of an endurance sport thing. And the idea is, like, say you're going to do a marathon on Saturday. So on Thursday night, you would eat a bunch of heavy carbs, bread and pastas. And nobody cares about it. There's a thing in it called glycogen, and your glycogen stores are kind of what determines how long you can keep doing an activity. And so the idea is you top those off. But research has pretty consistently shown that that's more of that if you're eating well, you don't need to have a giant dinner 2 nights. You just eat a decent dinner and you're fine. Because if you're eating well and training, your tank is already probably fine. So, yeah, Deanie, we had talked about that. Maybe putting together some takeout breakfasts of some kind, but
I feel like whoever those nutritionists were or whatever scientists that discovered the carbo-load thing, they were probably a lot of people's least favorite people. Because wouldn't anyone want an excuse to go and do pasta night at Minerva's and just eat as much as you possibly could? I mean, isn't that like the dream?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're overdoing it. I think the idea was just you load up a few extra calories to sort of save them. But I think, unfortunately, research has shown that
Hey, Don.
you can save calories, but not that way.
Okay.
Not for that. So,
Well,
hey, glad you guys are with us this afternoon. We move into the 6th chapter. You know, the first 5 verses are just... the idea is, again, advice to a young man, and basically they're telling him, don't get yourself in a situation where you're bound to. So it's a pledge to your neighbor. Don't bind yourself to another. But then the part that we want to look at is verse 6 through 11, and this I love these kind of verses. So I think we could say probably in large measure, and I don't, is this a trait, Michael? So I'll give it away here. We're talking a little bit about laziness or complacency. When we think of young people, is laziness, does that tend to be a male? Do you think of young men perhaps being a little more likely to not get things done? That might be fair academically, possibly.
Yeah, I think that
I don't know if
that would measure differently in different areas of life,
Yeah.
I think.
So, but for whatever reason, this father feels compelled to give his son advice about being diligent, about having a good work ethic. So, verse 6, go to the ant, you lazy bones. Consider its ways and be wise. Without having a chief or officer or ruler, it prepares food in summer and gathers its sustenance in harvest. So this is two things that we'll see in Proverbs. There'll be a lot about laziness because laziness is seen as an exact unwise way to live, the exact opposite of wisdom. And secondly, the author of Proverbs does what lots of wisdom literature, fables, and other things have done, Michael. He looks to nature. There will be times that the author will paint a picture of something he sees in the world and use it as an example or a paradigm of what we should or shouldn't do. Mostly positive. The assumption is that wisdom is kind of on display in the natural world if you'll look and find it. And here it's, I guess, what we would call industriousness, to stay busy, to work hard, like, for instance, the ants.
Yeah, and that's probably difficult to do in all generations. I think it's helpful to see this in a wisdom literature written thousands of years ago. Clint, I do think there's very much a narrative today. I hear, by nature of lots of encounters with parents, this idea that kids today are lazy. It's good to hear that this isn't the first generation. I suspect that every generation has had that leveled against them. There's something about adolescence, and there's something about that moment of life where you're beginning to think that you have some opinions, but you don't have any real responsibilities yet. And that moment in between, I think, is pregnant with opportunities to be lazy, to essentially expect things, but to not be willing to put in the work that it requires to get that done. And this seems to me to just be a good example of something that's been around with us for a long time.
Yeah, it seems like one of the dangers when you're young is you underestimate the consequences of not getting things done.
Right.
You, especially things that don't affect your daily life. You know, take out the garbage. Well, we missed the garbage truck. Clean your room. You know, so, but in a more agrarian agricultural world where food had to be put up, where food had to be planted, where in many ways livelihood depended on the timeliness of getting tasks done, maybe they're a little closer to those realities, and maybe they're a little more aware of the danger that laziness represents. We experience it as frustrating when people in our lives seem lazy, but not generally dangerous. I mean, probably not getting some form of exercise might be the closest analogy that we could come up with. But I don't think we think of as lethargy as something threatening, something that could harm us, other than maybe in a general way our health. But in the scripture, there's a real call to this. And so this word, lazy bones, is an interesting translation. You may have that. Do you have that, the language there, Michael? If I remember right, it has to do with, the one who doesn't move, kind of almost like a slug or a bump on a log kind of thing.
Yes, it's the lazy, idle, sluggish.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can find.
And we see it again here in verse 9. How long will you lay there lie there, O lazy bones? When will you rise from your sleep? And if you've been through life with teenagers, Michael, this is still ahead of you, and maybe your girls will be the exception to the rule. But my experience is there's something about those teenage years. They could literally sleep all day. There were moments in both of our girls' lives where 10 o'clock was early wake up on a day they didn't have anything to do. Now, in fairness, there weren't many days that they didn't have something to do, and so maybe that's part of it. But there is that sense of sleeping the day away. You know, we've had a week of football practice that was starting at 7 a.m., and every morning there are the kids rolling in at 7:10 and 7:15 who overslept and couldn't get themselves out of bed, and then mom and dad had to help them. So here, sleep is seen in this context not as something life-giving and refreshing, but as something tempting. A little sleep, verse 10, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed warrior. Like all things, the Bible's going to teach moderation, but the idea of overdoing sleep, of cutting corners, of taking it easy, of resting when you should be working, and poverty will come upon you like a robber. This is if you can imagine a father sort of lecturing a son who he thinks isn't working hard enough, then I think you're in the right context here.
Yeah, so looking at this word lazy bones, Clint, it appears like a better translation might be slothful, which isn't really a word that we often use. But the thing that gets us to the bones thing is it's lexically really closely related to another word for bones, but that word has the sense of great. So this is a contrast. Instead of being someone who's got strong bones, this is a person who's weak. It's a person who's slothful, who's sluggish. And, you know, I do think that that's a fascinating lack of our current vocabulary. This is what I mean by that. We, at least prior to pandemic, I think we often had very commonly in our conversation about how busy our calendars are. We're full up. People are going 120 miles an hour. And though we were all often complaining about the pace, it was taken for granted that was an appropriate way to live. And so in a world where speed and filling calendars is a given priority, it's maybe difficult for us to get our mind around the idea of slothfulness because we always fill ourselves up with stuff to do. But I don't think that full calendars is an antidote to sloth. I know people who go to lots of things that may not be able to move forward the things that matter to them in their life. And we all know that there do come seasons where it feels like the ability, the energy to move forward just doesn't exist. You try to pull it out and it's not there. And so I think there's a sense of maybe laziness that we should be mindful of, and that certainly makes sense, I think, when you talk about younger people. But this is also applicable, Clint, to that adult who finds themselves in cycles that they can't break out of, that they feel powerless. And we should consider that we need to stop sleeping, get out of bed, and do something about our situation.
Yeah, and maybe in our context, we would want to talk less about busy and more about productive. So that I can be busy, I can have lots of things, but if I'm not accomplishing much, then maybe that becomes, if by busy I mean sitting in front of the TV or the phone or whatever that might be, that's not likely to accomplish much, not likely to produce much. So again, I suspect that although we may all have our occasional bouts with sloth, the ancient mystics called it the noontime demon. One of the sins of the brotherhoods of monks was called acedia. And acedia is a word that means slothfulness. And the idea was, but it's not just lazy, it's soul weary. It's to be so tired, you feel like nothing you do matters. And they called it the noonday demon, that after lunch, that the noonday demon shows up, and it takes not only one's productivity, but it takes one's joy, it takes one's kind of passion, and leaves us blah. And while I think we've all probably been there and we've all battled that demon to some extent, my take on most average Presbyterians is, interestingly enough, sloth is not our denominational sin. We're productive people, we're busy people, we get things done. I think our struggles may be more pointedly obvious in other parts of the book. But again, I think if you've dealt with teenagers, oh yeah, lazy bones, get up, get some work done. You've probably said your version of some of these things trying to impart wisdom. So it's a good word for Friday to get some rest for the weekend.
Maybe these are better words to take for ourselves than to, maybe put on a billboard. I'm not sure how receptive people would be to being called lazy bones. I don't know how
You don't think this is one we should put on the church sign?
I mean, it might be interesting. We'll see.
Hey, thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate the time, and we're grateful to get to be with you like this. We will be back at it Monday, and I think move into the next part that we're going to look at. I hope it will be interesting. It's kind of it's a little different take. The rest of the 6th chapter is I won't call it unique, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and just to put a little bit of a plug in, make sure to join us for worship on Sunday, 8:50 a.m., wherever you're joining us for the Bible study. We've got both a good worship service, but also some fun information to share. So we'd love to see you on Sunday.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.
See you later. Thank you for spending time with us today as we study Scripture together. If you haven't already, we would invite you to follow us on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube. It's a great way to get notified when these studies happen every day at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Of course, if you've already done that, we would love for you to be able to give the video a like, to share it if you're on Facebook. This is a great way for other people to find the Bible study and be able to join us in this time studying Scripture. If this is your first time here, welcome. It's such a joy to have you be with us this day, and we would love to get to know you better. We would love if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to go to our website, fpcspiritlake.org/welcome. We'd love to get your name and email address, and we'll follow up with you personally to thank you for spending time with us this day. And for each and every person that is able to study Scripture and engage in this conversation, we want to say thank you. We look forward to our next time with you every weekday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And until then, God bless.